everyone, if you're looking for an easy to understand, beginner friendly video about inking in Lorcana, then this is the video you will want to watch. In today's video, I will be going over the basics of inking in Lorcana. I will cover the basics, such as what is ink and what is it used for, and I'll also talk about best practices for choosing which cards to ink. So stay tuned and click that like and subscribe button. What is ink? Think of ink like energy or mana that is required to play a card. Take these two cards for example. Every card has a number in the top left corner that shows how much ink is needed to play the card. These two cards both need 1 ink to play. Ink cards have no abilities, no effects, nothing. Think of them like batteries. You just use them to power up a device, in this case, the cards in your deck. This symbol is the ink symbol in Lorcana. Cards that have this large circular symbol are cards that can be transformed into ink. When a card is transformed into ink, they are no longer the card they used to be. Instead, they just become ink and are placed into your ink well. What does that mean? Take for example this Shield of Virtue card. It has a name, it has an ability that you can use if you play this card normally. But if you transform this card into an ink card, then it is no longer a Shield of Virtue card. It is now just an ink card. And like I mentioned before, ink cards are just energy used to play other cards. They have no abilities or effects, nada. And how do you know which cards you can ink? Well, since this is the ink symbol, you have to look for cards that have this symbol on the top left corner. So if you look at Shield of Virtue, it has the ink symbol along with its ink cost, surrounding its ink cost actually. Fire the Cannons does not have that same symbol. So Shield of Virtue is a card that you can ink, while Fire the Cannons is a card that you cannot ink. And when a card is transformed into the ink, they are placed into your ink well. So let's look at a visual representation of where that is. Here are the field zones in Lorcana. Your ink well is located at the bottom of your field, in this area. This will help you keep count of how much ink you have available to use. Keep in mind that you can only transform a card into ink once per turn. There are cards in the game that let you transform cards into ink as part of their effect. Let's take a look at one. One jump ahead. It reads, put the top card of your deck into your inkwell, face down, and exert it. We'll talk about what exerted means in a bit. But cards with these effects don't count towards your limit of inking once per turn. So you can use these cards multiple times after or before your normal ink. When your turn starts, your ink in the inkwell will start in the vertical position, like this card right here. This means that they are ready to be used. Each time you use ink to play a card to use an effect, you will turn the ink card horizontally, like these cards. That's what it means to be exerted. This shows that you've used those ink cards and cannot use them again. So this is a way for you to keep count of how much ink is available for you to use, and it also helps your opponent know how much ink you've already used in that turn. Now we will talk about how to choose which cards to ink in the game. Sometimes this can be a little confusing because you have different cards in your hand, and maybe they're all really good, and maybe they're all cards that you want to play, but you don't know how to choose which ones to ink and which ones to play. I've developed a general rule of thumb when choosing which cards to ink. It goes like this. So in the early game, which I generally define as 1 to 3 ink, you want to be inking your late game cards. Late game cards are cards that usually cost 7 ink or more. In the mid game, which is 4 to 6 ink, you want to be inking your early games. your early game cards or characters. So the reasoning behind this is because as the game progresses and you have more ink available to you, your early characters start to become weaker. So when you enter the mid game, you don't want to be playing your early game characters. You want to be playing your mid game characters and preparing to play your high or late game characters um, in the upcoming turns. So you want to be inking your early game cards. And once you get into the late game, which is a 7 or more ink, then you kind of want to be inking cards that you no longer need. And generally speaking, that's a lot of the early game cards. This is the general rule of thumb that I've developed while playing this game. There are exceptions, of course, and we will go over them. I have included a video at the end where you can see just kind of some of the decision making that I made while during the game. And so, but in general, this is a good rule of thumb when you don't know what to do and there are a lot of cards in your hand and you're not sure which is the best card to ink. If you follow this rule of thumb, you'll have an easier time playing the game, and most of the time you'll have made the right decision. Before getting into the video, I wanted to include this image of my hand that I started off with. And the reason why I wanted to include this image is because I wanted to highlight kind of like an exception to the rule. Not really an exception, but just a way to think about it. So this hand includes early game characters as well as late game characters. But most importantly, it includes the small Aladdin, which is a 3-cost Aladdin, and the 7-cost Aladdin. Now, normally, the 7-cost Aladdin would be transformed into ink in the early game because, as the rule states, anything that's 7 cost or higher, you want to ink at the start of the game. But, since we have the 3-cost Aladdin in our hand, the 7-cost Aladdin actually costs 5, since 5 ink is what you need to shift the 3-cost Aladdin and transform it into the 7-cost Aladdin. Now, if we follow the rule of thumb, we can consider the 7-cost Aladdin as a mid-game character because its true cost is 5 ink. And so we would not ink it early on, and we would ink other cards to prepare and play this Aladdin in the mid-game. So I've included the gameplay at the end of this video, so you can kind of follow along the decisions that I made when choosing which cards to ink. I do follow the rule of thumb that I set in place. Unfortunately, I did not include commentary on the video like I normally do, but you can easily follow my decision making. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will reply. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I've learned a lot from it. I developed this rule of thumb to help me better make more informed decisions when choosing which cards to ink. And I hope that if you guys follow my rule of thumb and find success like I've had, I hope you guys can share it with us or with me. And anyways, I hope you guys enjoy your games. I hope you guys are learning this game and enjoying it, because this game is truly fun and I'm enjoying it as well. So have a great day, Lumineers, until the next one.